We make a lot of noise on this channel, but one of the things that we don't talk about so much as sound designers is the importance of silence. So that's what we're going to be diving into this week, and we're going to talk about the importance of silence, some different scenarios where you may use silence, and how it affects your scene or your environment, as well as your viewers' emotions. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you'd like to be a part of the Sound Effects Guy Discord server, you'll find a link in the description below. With that being said, let's get started. So one of the biggest back and forths that we have as sound designers with our audience usually comes in with sci-fi movies. And anything that takes place in space, because space is a vacuum, and in space, no one can hear you scream. But what do we do as sound designers for these scenes? If Ben Burtt were to have went in the direction where there is no sound in space, then movies like Star Wars would be super quiet and super boring. So he decided he was going to say, screw it, it's a movie, I'm going to do whatever I want, and we're going to have sound in space. The end, deal with it. But then you have movies like Interstellar. And in Interstellar, there's a scene where Matt Damon's character is getting ready to detach a space station. Something goes wrong, he gets sucked out into space, and there's nothing. It's completely silent in that section of the film. And the trick is, how do we decide that's where we want to go? And I do actually have that scene here in Pro Tools. So you can see right here, this is the scene where he gets sucked out of the spaceship. And we have this chunk of silence right here. And you can see as I kind of scrub through this, during that silence, there's even a massive explosion that happens and we don't hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick just so you kind of have a reference point.
On. There is a moment.
It is nuts.
So you can hear that, we have this loud explosion, which loud explosion going into silence creates great dynamics. It's not over powerful. It's not a massive explosion, but because it goes into that silence, it creates a nice dynamic range and it seems more than what it is. Just like when her dialogue part comes in, it's super quiet. But because it happens right against silence, that dynamic range is perceived a lot higher. And so it's really a subjective decision on, do you go with sound in space? Do you go with silence in space? It's really up to you and your director and, whoever else is involved. But this silence makes this scene so much more intense. But why? So in order to understand why, we as sound designers have to understand a little bit of human psychology. And one of the human psychological facts is that we as humans are more conscious of abrupt change versus subtle change. And I can actually show this in a visual platform. So I've got Photoshop open, and in front of you in the middle of your screen, what you see is a blue square. And to most, if not all of you, it looks like this is one solid color. And what if I told you though, that this side is actually just a little lighter than this side over here? And it is. If we were to make this an abrupt change, it would be far more noticeable and look something like this. But I have a gradient applied to it so that it is a subtle change, and I can even show you. If we select our color range here, and I select the left side of that box and move over to the right side of the box, you'll see the color range change. And again, that is because they are actually two different colors. But our brains don't see that. Our eyes don't see that. And the same works for our ears. Our ears are far more susceptible to abrupt change in dynamic range, whether it's going from a low frequency to a high frequency, or a low amplitude to a high amplitude, or vice versa. Those are far more noticeable if they're abrupt. Now, what we as sound designers need to do is find a way to utilize that in our designs. One of the places that feeds off of humans reacting to abrupt change is more commonly horror films, and that is through jump scares. And so, for example, I have the movie Insidious here, and just a heads up, there is a jump scare coming, but we want to kind of analyze the sound. So in this scene, if you've ever seen the movie Insidious, you know that Darth Maul is about to show up behind our character here. And, the movie scene itself in general is kind of quiet, and that's done for a reason. It's so that when the creature shows up behind our character here, there's going to be a large dynamic range shift. And so I'll go ahead and play the scene.
I can still hear that voice.
So as you heard, the dynamic range, it was super quiet throughout that scene. And then the creature itself almost has like this ice cracking sound that follows it throughout the film. And so that is a little bit of a precursor, but then as soon as we see his face and his mouth opens, we get that huge dynamic range shift. And so if we were to actually take a look at the waveform, you can see exactly that I explained. During this scene, we've got scenes of dialogue and they're talking and different things are happening. But once we get right up to the section where we're about to have that jump scare, you can see by the waveform that the amplitude shifts and it gets quiet and then completely silent. And then we have the appearance of our creature. And so it is this huge dynamic range shift that is meant to startle the viewer. And so we see this all the time in horror movies. Anytime there's a jump scare, if there's a jump scare and you look at the audio waveform, you're going to be able to visually see where it happens, because that is what audio designers do. They play off that human emotion and humans' perception to abrupt changes and essentially use it against them. It's not so much scary. I mean, if we go back and we look at this creature, he's, like I said, it looks like Darth Maul. He's really not that creepy. Kind of looks like some weird tribal guy. What scares us is the sound. Now, in my opinion, one of the probably best uses of playing on the human emotion to this dynamic range shift is the movie A Quiet Place. And so if we actually take a look at this, is the waveform for the entire film. And you can actually see that while I don't really remember if there were any jump scares in the movie, I don't think there were, but it plays on what we know about movies and how they use jump scares along with visual references. And most of this film is very, very quiet. And in some spots it is silent, and then we get a little bit of sound, and that kind of plays on the viewer going, oh no, is it going to happen? Is there something that's going to jump out at me? And then there are the large dynamic shifts, and it just happens over and over again. And really, it's kind of a barrage of dynamic shifts to the viewer, to the point to where this movie comes out super creepy. And it's just playing on the emotion of the viewer. And even though it's really kind of evil to the viewer to just put them through that constant back and forth, as a movie and as entertainment that, you know, people go out and pay for to see, it's phenomenal. It's an amazing use of silence as, for lack of a better term, silence as a sound effect in creating that immersion level. All right, guys, so that is going to wrap things up for this week's video. I really hope that you found this informative in using the silence and dynamic range shifts in your pieces to add suspense, to add terror, to add, if you're working on sci-fi, realism. And I'd really like to know your thoughts. Would you rather see scenes such as space scenes where there is no sound, or would you rather have a full audio file playing against it? Let me know in the comments below. But like I said, that is going to wrap things up this week. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos such as this. Until next time.